interesting to watch a patient story in theatre format. It makes it real and tangible.
It's an open, engaging approach to involving and empowering people with personal experience in the development of services.
It provided a powerful stimulus for change. One of the best pieces of research I've been involved in, engaging and real.
As both a clinician and an academic, it was an entirely novel experience.
So I moved from somebody who was slightly sceptical to somebody thinking this has got some real value.
We're currently spending £8 billion on health research in the UK per year, and much of that has very little impact, direct impact on patient care.
What you tend to get as academics is you push out your information and you don't bring it together communities, you don't try to catalyse change, and it just goes nowhere.
And we know that scientific research has the potential to improve the quality of care, but actually on its own it's probably not sufficient to do that, because it's generally generated external to the context in which it needs to be used, and actually practitioners, patients know an awful lot about what needs to happen as well. So it's about realising potential of all those different forms of knowledge to work together to improve patient care.
It's my pleasure to give you Altered State.
In thinking about how to combine different forms of knowledge to sort of, in a sense, to amplify what they could do in terms of improving patient care, came to the idea of forum theatre, which has been used in lots of settings to affect change, but not so often in the NHS, because it's a way of presenting diverse knowledge in a real embodied form.
A shift usually starts at 7 a.m. and can last for about 12 hours.
Another reason for using forum theatre was its fit with Mindlines research. This research shows that effective practice depends on multiple forms of knowledge, including research, and is best learnt using social means. Forum theatre explicitly enables people to work with diverse forms of knowledge to come up with creative solutions. In this case, patient, practitioner and research evidence could be presented simultaneously.
What I think forum theatre actually did beautifully was it brought together those different communities.
Forum theatre is more than just a play. The first step involves developing a performance based on diverse people's experience of an issue of importance to them where something needs to change. In this case, the poor uptake of evidence regarding post-injury psychological care. Then, you invite an audience of people for whom the issue resonates. The audience watch the play straight through. They discuss what they have seen and share their own knowledge. But performance 2 is where things really start to happen. This time, the audience is invited to stop the play and to reenact elements to see if they can individually or collectively alter the outcome. In the final step, they co-produce a list of key recommendations to improve care.
In forum theatre, we're not so interested in stories that already have happy and satisfactory endings. In forum theatre, we're more interested in stories that don't yet have happy and satisfactory endings, and we use it and your expertise and your experience and your ideas to see how we might get to the happy and satisfactory endings that we might want, different to the one that we're about to see.
The forum theatre process is quite a unique way of undertaking a research project, which is what this is essentially, because it's very much grounded in the experiences and perspectives of both patients and healthcare professionals and researchers. So it's bringing in the evidence with different people's experience to then try to take that experience or those experiences forward to benefit healthcare in this particular instance, and that is quite unusual in research.
So it was common ground for professionals and for patients, which was what we were trying to achieve. So trying to find out what was happening on both sides of the story.
It's a very complex environment, the NHS, so it wasn't about coming along and saying, I've got this piece of research and I think you need to do this. It was saying, I'd like to understand what you know about this subject too, and when we put all our heads together, can we come up with solutions? So we hope to improve improve that, but also to test whether forum theatre may be something that could be used more generally as a service improvement model, or to take knowledge closer to where it needs to work. So what we wanted to do was to create a play or an intervention that could be used more widely. And so rather than drawing the information from our play from a particular community, we drew it from systematic research. So that's quite unusual. And so what that involved was interviewing multiple patients and practitioners, running focus groups and a literature review. And we put all that information together into a play, a blended story that told the patient's story from the day before injury until 12 months later.
The way that the research was embedded into the piece was that there were flashes of research-based evidence that were put on a screen. And what I think that did is that if it had just been a theatre performance, we would have started to move away from the whole research aspect of it. But because this research information was being drip-fed in, it did mean that we kept going back to the research evidence, which is a way of grounding it.
The play wasn't just a play that anybody had written, that it had been based on interviews and, so therefore you know that it's an evidence-based play. It resonated with me and I wanted to know more about it.
In order to make this method work, we invited a combined audience of patients, practitioners and researchers. So in a sense, those people reflected the same people who informed the play. They were the people for whom it was going to be meaningful, and the people who had a real vested interest in making something improve. So the first performance shows straight through the play as we've devised it, unedited.
It's been a tough year leading up to the accident. My mum had died. She'd been suffering from depression. Suddenly, my wheel got stuck in a rut. I remember falling to the ground and hitting myself on this side and rolling.
I loved how it took an individual patient's story and then expanded that out to explore the themes around injury and psychological impacts of injury. That was really fantastic.
After the first performance, the facilitator prompted debate about what the audience had seen.
Consider a couple of things. On Rachel's behalf, our patient perspective, what do you think it is that Rachel wants or needs in this story? What are the obstacles or challenges or barriers that get in Rachel's way as she tries to get what she needs or wants?
So you really got people to think, really using their own knowledge and experience to put themselves into that actor's place and say, if I was her, what would I need? And I think that was a really useful way of stimulating debate and getting people to really think more broadly about what they'd just seen. So the second performance is really where all that knowledge gets sort of stirred up and put to work, and that's the really interesting bit with forum theatre. So you've presented people with a play where the outcomes are poor, and you invite them to interact with it, to alter outcomes. And so the second performance, you actually rerun the play, only the audience can become the actors. They can take the place of an actor.
Where do you want to take it from to show us your idea?
Well, it was just the way he approached it, really.
Take it from that point, see what's different this time.
It
Go.
took 2 hours before he arrived.
Hello, what's your name?
When they stop the story and say, right, who agrees with this, who doesn't agree with this, right, come and change it. That was brilliant, because people were like, yeah, I can do this, I know what I'm doing.
The really exciting sort of part of the interaction between the actors and the audience came when people were actually going on stage or directing what they wanted to see happening.
What was different that time? He asked her name. What else was different that time? What was different about the approach?
Well, it was warm and friendly, and I think it made the patient that it feel quite secure.
Rachel or the nurse? So, see what's different this time.
You get to see what your intervention might do as an individual, and the facilitator then very skillfully involves the audience into discussing, well, has that person suggested made any difference? Is it feasible? And I think within the NHS that's particularly important. We probe and say, well, that's great, we've made things better for this patient. Would that really work? And you get this lovely dynamic discussion.
Well, there's some people at desk that might be able to help you. I'm just with the patient at the moment.
Right, I'll go and ask at the desk.
I saw consultants taking part and patients taking part, and it was nice to see that sort of collaboration between the two of them.
And it also makes the people watching, I think, probably take things in a lot more than if you just sat and watched it and then went away.
The recommendations that came out of the workshop were generally quite practical. Whether they'll be implemented remains to be seen, but there were things like having psychological champions in each clinical area. After the first workshop, we were invited to run a second one in the Major Trauma Network Hospital. In this case, rather than presenting the research evidence as black and white slides between each scene, we decided to simulate an interview between an experienced practitioner and an expert in post-injury psychopathology. This seemed to work really well, and the research evidence was much better integrated into subsequent discussions and reenactments. So rerunning the workshop gave us an ideal opportunity to test our idea that this intervention could be used in different contexts and with different audiences and come up with equally valuable evidence-informed recommendations. But these would be according to what was possible in the local context.
I think forum theatre is something that's adaptable and you could use it for other things. I mean, there's lots of stories out there and you could adapt it to any part of healthcare.
As a clinician looking after major trauma victims on a daily basis, there were so many things that I could take away to my clinical practice.
It would just trigger your brain when you're actually in the process of doing it. It would just, I imagine it would just remind you that, that this could be done slightly differently.
People tend to focus on the facts and the figures, the evidence, in order to try to change people's minds. And what forum theatre really demonstrated beautifully is how much if you do not have that emotional kick, if you don't have that emotional pull, you're not going to get the change you need.
Hello, doctor.
Hello.
Thank you.
So I see you've been to the GP for surgery quite a lot in the last 9 months.
It's not going well.
No?
No, it's not going well.
Okay.
I can't move, I'm in pain, I'm round with my husband, I need help.
If I'd had to read a review article around this issue, would it have had the same impact as attending forum theatre? Well, no, I can confidently say not. And I think that's because of the patient story and recognising from the theatre itself those themes that come across in everyday practice that you can't possibly reflect through writing down on a piece of paper.
Actually seeing things in action and seeing it in front of you and being engaging with the patients and the practitioners is brilliant.
You end up with something that can be taken into practice and is feasible to do and practical to do in our current NHS.
All the press releases, all the scientific journals, all of that stuff doesn't make very much difference at all. I think it is moving forward in a direction we need to go in.
It completely changed how I spoke to my patients.
I have explored with my consultant colleagues this issue as a direct result of taking part in the research workshop.
I have reflected on past experiences when I may not have appreciated the distress the patient was actually going through.
I learned quite a lot needs to change to make the patient feel secure.
We're hoping to implement the majority of the workshop recommendation into our trauma service, but it will take time.
I was already aware and keen to improve service, but the workshop gave me some positive directions and insight into patients' needs.
I've incorporated the psychological impact of injury into a master's level clinical training module I'm
As a
teaching.
direct result of this workshop, we've developed a new patient and family liaison support service run by clinicians.
We're developing a patient discharge leaflet with signs to look out for and signposting to sources of support.
All the patients who have attended have expressed interest in contributing to further research.
I realised I have been suffering from PTSD and referred myself for support.
It enabled me to develop interest at management level because they're now keen to support and improve the way we address post-injury needs.
It will help inform development of our new major trauma psychologist role.
It's enlightened certain aspects of care that I realise I must keep in the forefront of my mind.